I think there's, modern developers are now trying to make sure that they build a game that is good for new players that want to get in and interested, but also has depth. And if you remove one or the other, you'll struggle. The thing is that it's not just how easy or hard the gameplay is that keeps people playing fighting games. It's clear to me because the games that have the most player base are games that in general are extremely in depth and difficult to play. If you've never been a new player in a MOBA, it's like you jump in, everybody you're playing with is like a smurf probably, right? So you jump in, everybody knows exactly what they're doing. They know what all the heroes or champions do. They know all the items. They're super familiar with all the map, like how it works and everything, where all the objectives are, how to like play. And like you're like, I don't even understand. I barely know how to move. I know there's a tower, there's creeps that come up. I'm supposed to hit them. And then, oh shit, I'm dead. I didn't know there was 5 people here. How the fuck was I supposed to know there was 5 people here? It's an incredibly difficult game to jump into. And people will say, well, you have teammates. But even if you have teammates, it doesn't fucking matter because the actual act of playing the game is like, I don't know what the fuck's happening here. This is fucked up and I'm getting destroyed. That will happen in fighting games too, but people still keep playing MOBAs. Like the answer is why? What are they doing better? And so what do fighting games need to do to keep people playing? It's not just enough to have the game be visually incredibly beautiful like Guilty Gear or whatever, because current Guilty Gear is still beautiful to this day and it's not the most played fighting game ever, right? It's like you have to have a game that's beautiful. You have to have tons of content that's playable and there to do for single player stuff so that you have stuff to grind outside of just playing online all day, right? You have to have stuff that you can unlock. You have to have netcode that is extremely playable. I think having a competitive scene and support for that is useful. It's not necessary, but it's useful. You have to enable and empower stuff like streamers or video makers or people or content around your game. You can't not have that because most people when they decide if they're going to play a game, a lot of times people used to just always look up reviews. But now what do people do when they are interested in a game? What do you guys do? What do? I open Twitch or I open YouTube and I look up the game and I see what the streamers or the YouTubers or whatever, what it looks like when the game is being played, if they like it or not. That kind of stuff is important. Fighting games require more effort from a beginner than MOBAs. I'm not sure if that's true. I've played tons of different kinds of games, and I don't know that I think that is true, and I don't know if the difference in effort level is massive enough to really matter that much. The current game that has the most success in terms of like just sales and shit is Mortal Kombat, and that's a game that has tons of single player content, good netcode. MK has a huge budget that they spend on marketing and making sure that all of this shit is fucking, they have money to do all this stuff. They have online competitive leagues, they support the competitive scene, they do all these things right? So that's why I think the game sells well. There's a lot of different reasons, but it helps with that reason. So how do you, if you're not Mortal Kombat, build a game that people show up to and the viewership and the entries and all that grows? One of the only other fighting games that's like that currently is like Tekken, right? Tekken does not have good netcode. Tekken does not have good tutorial. Tekken does not have an easy beginner experience. I think it's one of the harder beginner experiences for fighting games in terms of like going from a beginner to something else. It has a bad lobby system. But what Tekken does have is champions that fight for it. Because I've thought a lot about why Tekken as a fighting game grows around all of the other fighting games that are not growing or are not growing as quickly or have more features and stuff and they're not building as much of a community or whatever the reason is. But like for Tekken in particular, they have people that fight for it and they fight the good fight for it everywhere. Tekken has the best champions that you could ask for a community and a scene. If it wasn't for Eris streaming on Twitch, Tekken would not be as big as it is. When you have Eris streaming and creating tutorials that wouldn't exist without him, the game doesn't have these tutorials. If you want to learn Tekken, you have to go to a channel like Eris or the Blasted Salami, or you have to go to Main Man, or you have to go somewhere to find these fucking tutorials, right? If it wasn't for people like them, these creators, you wouldn't have it. If it wasn't for Eris restreaming Tekken World Tour events to build up the viewership, if it wasn't for Eris then being posted on live stream fails because he's funny and shit, and then random viewers who don't even play fighting games going to Eris stream, if it wasn't for as big as his channel and community is, and if it wasn't for all the tutorials and content and shit that he creates just by loving the game, it's not like he's being paid by Bandai Namco $1 billion to do this. He just loves the game. Bigger streamers know who Eris is, so they watch his stream. Like Eris as a hub and all the other people who create content around the game are super important for Tekken success. And then behind the scenes, they have probably the greatest champion anybody in fighting games could ask for on your side. People like Rick and people like Markman. When you have Rick, he runs like the best tournament series in the country and is involved with the Tekken World Tour. It's the reason the TWT went from a small, Wizard World event where me and Rick and Rip and all these people and Mark were all there, and then transformed into this huge Tekken World Tour, and it has dojo events involved with it, and They have stuff like Eris is allowed to restream all these different events with a rotating finals. They did all these things correct. Think of a company in fighting games. If you want to know if Markman works for these people, the answer is yes. In some capacity, in some way, Markman fights for Tekken everywhere. You know what I mean? So he is a beautiful knight in shining armor that fights for Tekken no matter where. So when you have this many different champions fighting for a game that just they love, it means the game is just flying. It helps that the game is incredibly good. You don't have people fighting for your game if it's not a very good game. So that helps as a way to start. But you can circumnavigate and get past stuff like not having tutorials and having bad online and, you know, all these other things if you have enough champions to push the game forward and show you how cool it is in the best kind of ways. Besides that, I feel like the Eunice community has done a great job of that, despite not having huge champions that are like super popular like Eris or something. Yeah, when people say shit like MOBAs are not as hard to get into as fighting games, or MOBAs you can just jump in and play it, you guys are making shit up. MOBAs and fighting games are both hard when you first start. Almost everything is hard the first time you ever played. Have you ever seen someone who's never played a shooter game play a shooter? Yeah, they just get the shit kicked out of them. The thing is if you had this many people who are pushing forward and fighting for the games they loved as much as them in every different community, I agree that they would grow more because of it. They also criticize the game heavily. Yeah, of course. I mean, as much as they love the game, they also agree that there's shit wrong with it, you know? You wouldn't know enough about it to talk shit about it in a really educated way if you didn't love it, right? Why do you think I could spend an hour talking about all this different shit about what happened at Tokyo Game Show this weekend? I wouldn't know this much shit to talk on Street Fighter if I didn't really love the game, right? I wouldn't know all this shit to talk about it. The problem is I feel like, so somebody was asking me about Street Fighter earlier and why people don't love it and shit, and I feel this similarly about Street Fighter and its champions. It doesn't feel like there's as powerful people working for the success of the game in a way that comes from them loving it and wanting to be better. I streamed a super premiere out of my bedroom. That is love. They did lose their champion in Mike Ross. You see, that is something that is important to think about. When Street Fighter had growth, remember how many champions they had fighting for them. And they've all been burned or pushed away or are burned out and not interested anymore. And there needs to be new people taking their place and fighting the good fight, right? Or if it's not worth fighting for, then don't fight for it, you know? I remember when I played a lot of KI and I talked about how great everything that they were doing with the game is and shit. I remember the amount of people who were like, you're being paid by Microsoft or Iron Galaxy. I fucking wish. I'd be rich as shit right now. You're being paid by these people to talk about how good the game is. You know, this game's not even that great. Street Fighter 4 is the greatest fighting game of all time. Who gives a shit about Killer Instinct? Street Fighter 4 is so much better than that game, and that game's trash. It's on Xbox. Who cares? Now those same people are KI wins again, typing this shit all these years later when they didn't care to give any other game another shot. Then when they felt like their Street Fighter 5, their champions all quit the game and they weren't interested in what they were playing anymore. When their game stopped being like the top dog, they were like, maybe I should try other games. And then now they're like, yeah, well, fucking, I played Tekken and Guilty Gear and all these other games. These games are dope. And there's been that shift. There's a noticeable shift in how the FGC feels about other games. It's happened in the last 3 to 4 years since Street Fighter V's release. Obama, I'm sure you know as well as I do, the amount of people back in the Street Fighter 4 era who, if you told them to give this game a shot, they'd say, no one plays about that game. No one gives a shit about that game. There was a Snake Eyes interview. Brutus already beat me to it. There's a Snake Eyes interview for Street Fighter 4 where Snake Eyes says, he's like, yeah, I really think that Street Fighter 4 has the highest level of competition, and it's just not close. The level of competition is here, and every other game is here. And if you were not a Street Fighter fan at the time, you knew how silly of a take that was. People were like, now hold on. Street Fighter 4 was the pinnacle of competition. There was no other game with as hard of community, etc. They're like, now Tekken is harder, or Guilty Gear is hard, but back then, no way. And I'm like, dude, who do you think was playing Tekken and Guilty Gear back then during the Street Fighter 4 era, you dumbass? The exact same people who are playing it now. So the competition wasn't any easier back then. It was the same motherfuckers been playing this game for forever. You just didn't know it because you weren't looking. So why are you gotta make up some fucking bullshit in your brain about how all these other games weren't valuable or the competition wasn't as high or some made up shit about it? Of course it was as high. You just weren't paying attention to it. Yeah, for a lot of reasons, I think Street Fighter V pushing a lot of people away to try other fighting games was very good for the overall scene, in the sense that it made a lot of people open to trying other games. The issue, though, however, is it has turned the mindset of people from, like, I want to try other games, this shit is tight and push it up. There are people like that, but there's also people who are, all these games are fucking trash, every game is dead. There's those people too, and I think they exist for the same reason. They're both burnt fan bases of a game that split into different trees. There's the category that went, wow, all these other games are great, I play whatever I like and I love it, which is the category I've always been a part of, and the X or Y game is dead, this game is trash category, which is just, who the fuck cares? Just play what you want, you know? I've never actually existed in fighting games and had people not tell me my game wasn't trash or dead. Ever. When I played KI back before in the day, it was a trash game, it was dead. When I played Injustice, it was a trash game, that was dead. When I played Mortal Kombat X, the game was trash and it was dead. When I started playing Street Fighter with Street Fighter 5, or actually when I started playing Street Fighter 4, I started playing an Ultra, and people told me, Ultra Street Fighter 4 is trash and it's gonna die. Street Fighter 5 is gonna change the world. So I started playing Street Fighter 5 and people told me Street Fighter 5 is trash, the game sucks, nobody loves it. I started playing whatever it is. There's always been people like that. It seems very simple to me to just play the game you enjoy, and then who gives a shit about whatever else you're not playing. My perspective on fighting games is very different, I think, because I started by entering the scene and playing games that weren't that popular, and people didn't say a lot of great things about them, right? Yeah, dude, I'll just give it a shot. The thing is that I'll give it all a shot. If I give it a shot and I don't like it, I'm going to let you guys rock and do your thing. If I give it a shot and I do like it, then I'll support you guys however I can. So somebody asked if I was going to try Skullgirls. I get asked that a lot. I mean, I've played the game like once, but I've always talked about the game and said positive things about it because a lot of people say Skullgirls is a really fun game and it has good netcode, and the developers did a great job to do cool things and implement them into the game. I think like the infinite prevention system is a cool idea. Yeah, there's a lot of things about the game that seems cool to me. I haven't learned it. I think it's a game that I'd probably enjoy if I played it, but I have so many fucking games on my plate already. Learn Skullgirls, bitch. That makes me less likely to learn the game. I said on stream something like, yeah, I think Skullgirls is a cool game. It's really cool. And then somebody was like, wow, Sajam's gonna learn Skullgirls? Learn Skullgirls. You won't, bitch, no balls. And I was like, I mean, you know, there's a lot of ways to champion for your game, but I don't think that that's probably the one that's going to make me want to play it. I was like, all right, I mean, I'm sure your game is great. I have lots of other, nice things to say about it, but the more shit like that comes at me, the less likely it's like, you know, when I used to do character breakdowns, when people would be like, when the fuck are you going to break down X character? I just move that character to the back of the list. No balls confirmed. Well, the Skullgirls moved down again. I had nothing but nice things to say about Skullgirls. Just leave me alone. I'm sure if I played it, I'd like it, but I have too much that I'm already playing to probably balance another game.